What's up, everyone? This is not typically the format of videos that I tend to do, but I do believe that it's very important to really preview this match into some capacity, or in some capacity. And it's a match between Enzo Maresca, Hansi Flick, two managers who are classified as elite thinkers when it comes to tactical acumen. And I believe that given such a circumstance, it is very important to, do a video speaking about Enzo Maresca versus Hansi Flick, a tactical mind battle. Now, there's many things. Hansi Flick has been classified as an architect of vertical football. He's been classified as a key manager who has really helped to shape that landscape of how German managers are shaped and how they are perceived. And I do believe that with that being the case, it's going to be a very interesting match for rival fans, neutral fans, Champions League watchers to really, put themselves through. And of course, Enzo Maresca is known as an obsessive tactician or a technician. He likes to do things very technical at times, and I have also said this numerous times, that it's very pragmatic. It's a system that requires a lot of patience in terms of hoping that gaps will open up. And I'm going to explain all that. I'll go through full details on how all of that will shape out and how that can all pan out. But he's crafting something that I have to say that it requires a lot of positional awareness. You need it to be positional in machinery, and it's very important to think about that. So I'm going to speak about the managerial philosophies. Of course, you do have verticality versus control. Flick is all about the high tempo, the compression, the whole transitions, always hitting on transitions, trying to get beyond the team that he's playing against. And that high line, the vertical pass, is always trying to make some vertical passes. It's never typically sideways. It's always directness. It's all about being very vertical with it. If it's a Yamini Yamal on the right hand side, it's always trying to find him, and then he tries to run, and he may make a few turns, but the end result is always vertical passes. The passes are always curled into a certain way that it requires you to be moving in a vertical manner that allows you to get to the end of a cross from Yamal, or you see him do a curling shot and it leads to a goal. It's always directness. Going through the center area that a few times, of course, with the lack of Pedri, it requires them having to use the wide aspects even more. So it's very important to think about that. And Enzo Maresca is about box midfield, the box-to-box midfield aspect, where you'd have either Caicedo or Enzo Fernandez or both pushing up slightly, being a part of the attack and giving you that impression of something that you can actually say, okay, we can see what's going on here. But one of the biggest issues that I've had with Maresca's system is not the fact that it's just slow. The slowness is acceptable if you score goals. The problem is it requires you to be very patient, to see where those gaps will be opening up in behind. And at times you've had to see him, using third man runs. You always have to have somebody running on behind or in behind, to drag out two defenders or two players. It could ideally be a fullback and a centre back, leaving up that gap for them to make a cross-field pass across the surface, or going cross over the top, doing a cross-field pass over to the right hand side or left hand side, vice versa. And because of that, it requires you to always hope that those gaps will open up, and that is one thing that I've always been concerned about, because if those gaps are not there, what are you going to do? It's going to leave you susceptible to being one-dimensional, and maybe has a plan B. I'm yet to really see that, but the issue, and one thing I have to applaud him for, is the fact that he constantly finds a way to open up the gaps. Low blocks are something that Chelsea have struggled with for a while, and of course in the context of versus Hansi Flick's teams are usually, or they line up The formation typically requires them to be pushed up, having that aspect where they're just constantly pushing forward, pushing forward, pushing forward, high intensity, quick movement, quick transitions. That's the case. So of course the whole dynamics of a low block may not be the case unless Hansi Flick says that okay, we need to be cautious. But we saw the likes of Bayern Munich. We saw what happened against Chelsea. They were able to get a comfortable win with a high line, with that high intensity, that high octane, impressive, extensive way of pushing your team forward and pushing your opponents to make mistakes or have no gaps, or if they try to make a pass, you keep closing down the aspects of those passing avenues that they can have. So of course I can get it. It's going to be a very tactical match, and I'm aware of that. But speaking about the whole thing of Maresca, though, the whole box midfield aspect, the rest defense, the defense tends to be resting at a standstill at times, unless Chelsea are on the attack, and that is when you get to see that shaping of what I will be going into next, which is the aspect of the tactical structure. And I'm going to speak about Hansi Flick, albeit it's Chelsea versus Barcelona, but I'm going to speak about Hansi Flick's tactical structure. So of course it's very synonymous with the way that Maresca has played at Chelsea in terms of the way in which they operate when they have the ball. It typically gives you that shape of them being on the ball, and it's typically on paper, of course, the structure that guides the players as to where they should be when it comes on to the setup or the structure. 4-2-3-1, but of course we are able to quickly see that change into a 3-2-5. And it sounds synonymous, as I said, with the likes of Enzo Maresca. You see that 3-2-5 to 4-2-3-1 structure where it keeps switching. It alternates at different intervals, and Hansi Flick is able to do that because of the high intensity, the high quick movement, the plays of Lamine Yamal being supported with that. If it's a Jules Koundé, for example, you see him pushing up, and then you would have that extra support there, leaving the double pivot or whoever is there to create that two. And then you do have a fullback, as I said. It could be Jules Koundé on the right hand side, or vice versa. Balde at times being on that left hand side, he pushes up, which is where the whole vulnerabilities, the highline vulnerabilities, tend to be an issue. But you do see that if it's a Ronald Araujo, you have a Eric Garcia, whatever the case may be, it becomes synonymous with all of that, because you see the likes of, at least for this season, Rashford. Rafinha is coming back into the fold. He may be back for the match as well. So you're able to see that 3-2-5 structure that can be formulated after you have that flat 4-2-3-1 to start off the game, and of course they go back to it and they do alternate. It becomes a 3-5-1-1 where you do have like a Lewandowski or Ferran Torres being pushed up, and then you have somebody right in behind him. Sometimes Lamine Yamal becomes that player that will come from right into the central area. So you do see that, and that is something that I find very fascinating about the way that Hansi Flick teams have played. It's always been synonymous with it. At Bayern Munich, for example, you saw a similar structure where it would be like a 4-2-3-1 still, yes, but at the time when Bayern Munich could have had Thomas Müller being there and Lewandowski as well, you would have somebody being in behind, and you'd have Thomas Müller being that supporting striker. And you do see that aspect at times where you do, and it always alternates. It's not one person. You'll have the wide player, yes, but the wide player would actually drift in. So in the case of, and I know that is on the camera, it's going to show that this is the left for you guys, and this is the right for you guys as well. But this is my right, this is my left. So when I say right, I mean in terms of Yamal, and left would of course be Rashford and Rafinha before Rashford have come in after the injury to Rafinha and all of that. We are aware of the fact that is the structure, that is the way in which he likes to play. But as I said, there's high intensity. The wingers do double up. The pivot becomes like a launch pad for what they want to do. As I said, Pedri is a massive miss for them, because if they had a Pedri, it gives you that dynamics of something different. You'd have more confidence because he can be that heart of the midfield. He can give them that freedom. He can be that box to box as well. And you'd have a Frankie de Jong who would give him that freedom, and also he'd give Frankie de Jong that freedom. And it sounds synonymous with what Chelsea have been able to develop, especially since the likes of Andres Santos came into the fold, and Andre Santos getting the opportunity to play against Burnley, starting that match and showing, and Enzo Maresca, realizing the fact that he can actually trust Andre Santos to give that freedom to Enzo Fernandez, and also Enzo Fernandez alongside Andre Santos can allow themselves to give such a key pass in those aspects, or key pass in that midfield area, because the midfield is a crucial part of what Maresca wants to do. And of course, that is why we do see at times it may not be necessarily a 3-5-1-1, 3-5-2, 3-4-3, but you tend to see that you have a fullback who is dropping deep, and typically that most likely ends up being a Kukurea. And of course, there's some instances where it doesn't give you that 3-4-3 or that 5 at the back structure. Of course, in the defense, we do see it become a 5-3-2 structure, where you do have if you're playing with a quote-unquote false 9 alongside a Joao Pedro, who's also a supporting striker, you see that structure become a 5-3-2, where you have the likes of a Caicedo, for instance, dropping deep, or in the case of Burnley versus Chelsea, you do see that Andre Santos drops deep to be an additional third man for that defense, and you do see it become a 5-3-2. At instances, it may become a 5-2-3, all depending on who decides to drop deep. It could be Joao Pedro dropping deep in that midfield area to give you that spatial awareness, and then you do have the likes of like a Buildup, or the case may be, pushing up, and then you have those wide players like a Pedro Neto and a Estevao Willian, or Pedro Neto and a Jamie Gittings, or a Garnacho, whatever the case may be, whatever variation it is, that is what you tend to see. So of course, it's very important that we talk about that aspect. So as I said, 4-3-3, 3-2-5, as I said, it could become a 5-2-3 as well, depending on the variation. And as I said, Kukurea is typically the go-to man, because we know that from Brighton days, Kukurea is able to, and even Barcelona days, he was able to be that left centre back, then becoming a left wing back, left back, different variations. De Zerbi and all of those people, they loved, not De Zerbi, Graham Potter loved that. And of course, De Zerbi was robbed of getting the opportunity to utilize such a key player. So of course, we know that that's the situation. We know that is the reality, that the structure in which they want to play, it typically varies from a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, whatever the variation you want to use, whatever terminology you want to use. Because, as I said, Maresca loves to utilize a 3-man midfield, at least in certain matches. And typically, he doesn't trust, or he didn't really believe that it was Andre Santos' time to really give him that chance. A 4-3-3 is something that you would also see, a 3-man midfield, Reece James tucking in to be another midfielder, which is not ideally his best role. But at times we do see that. And of course, you do see the situation where in certain matches, Caicedo would have played as a fullback or as a right back, or quote unquote in that area, which allowed you to have that freedom of playing when Lavia was available. Lavia, Enzo Fernandez, and then Caicedo making it into that space. So just like he has the same ideology of, let's play Reece James as a right back based on flat position, but of course he tucks in, and then you'd have like the likes of a Estevao linking up with him, or whatever the case may be, or a Caicedo linking up with a Estevao Willian, making a pass here, and then Estevao making the runs. And then you'd also have a Pedro Neto or Jamie Gittings, for a better example, running on that other side of Garnacho. And then you have Enzo Fernandez. So it's a case where Enzo Fernandez is directing the ball over to Kukurea alongside a Gittings. And then you'd also have like a Caicedo or Andre Santos, at least in the game against Burnley, supporting Pedro Neto, making those passes, finding the gap. So it's one midfielder, when he's using a 3-man midfield, would also be supporting the fullback or the wing player on that side. And then you'd also have Enzo Fernandez, who typically be on that left-hand side, pushing up, adding support, being centralized as well, being a centre attacking midfielder as well, but also not being one, being a 10 but also not a 10 at the same time. Because when you do have the likes of Cole Palmer, you also see it become a case of as I said, you see the situation where it becomes a 3, at times 3-2-5, because you have an additional player pushing up, and that is where you see a Reece James being of support to the likes of a Caicedo, or Enzo Fernandez being supported by Reece James, when Caicedo is able to push up or make some pressing, as he's a high presser. He tries to forces the team that he's playing against to make mistakes. So of course we know that that is a situation. But we see that the higher Nora wingers, the whole double pivot launch pad, same synonymous with it, and patient progression, being patient, trying to open up that gap in behind, and that is the reality. So the whole same shape, the philosophies do collide there, because as I said, the same shape, three man midfield at times, 3-2-5, 3-5-2, whatever the case may be. You see that whole variation of a double pivot at times having that exact same philosophy. It's very present. It's always a case where the wide player is either supported by the fullback or the wing back who is right behind him. And as I said, the midfielder in Hansi Flick's position or possession, it requires you to be able to do that. Where you have the ball, you make the pass to Yamal tries to do his little footwork, try to get beyond players, create a chance, make a cross into the box to find a Lewandowski, a Ferran Torres, a Rashford on the left hand side. That is what you end up seeing at the end of the day. So the key difference is, of course, we know that the build-up is very fast. I mentioned it already. Hansi Flick's system requires you to be moving quick move. And we have seen Maresca's team move quickly with the ball at certain intervals, but it's always about the slow build-up, the slow progression of the ball, so that you can continuously open up those gaps, and then you have a third man running in to distract the fullback and the centre back, would ideally be on either the left hand side of that defense, and then it opens up that gap where they make the pass there, it pushes up there, you make a pass back. And that is why you end up seeing that, because it opens up that gap, it leaves that space in behind. A Kukurea making those runs, Enzo Fernandez making those runs, trying to get to the end of some passes, some crosses, and that is the situation. You see the whole wide aspect, players coming into that side, trying to drift in, trying to get beyond, trying to go back, find the space back if Caicedo is there, or Enzo Fernandez, and they try to make a pass, they try to take a shot. It works sometimes, especially when Caicedo tries to score a goal. Always ends up being a case where you take that strike, and of course the wingers try to tuck into the box, trying to come in from the wide area into the central area and try to make that pass or to take the shot, as we saw with SFO scoring in the Champions League, or in other instances where he got the goal that he did. So of course we know that it's spatial oriented for Maresca, and it's ball oriented for Hansi Flick. Very simple, nothing about it is bad. Build up, we know the Flick fast. Maresca is methodical, so you do see that situation where it's about methods, trying to get those gaps to open up in behind. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens in that match. So of course we know the chance creation aspect is a massive part of it all, where Flick requires chaos. It's all about the chaos. It's all about making those gaps be there, but at the same time moving the ball in a way where your team is causing the opponents to really be confused, to know that okay, we can't do this, because as soon as we lose the ball, boom, they're on their counter attack already, because they have the players who have the skills. They have the likes of a Rashford, they have a Frankie de Jong who can make those good passes, control the tempo for them as well. So it requires you to realize that Flick's chaos system and structure, it gives you that level of caution, because you don't want to be leaving yourself vulnerable. But at the same time, as I've said, Flick's system requires you to also be very good defensively, because if you don't have the good defense, boom, in a matter of seconds, they're in behind, taking a shot, hitting a crossbar, whatever the case may be. And in the likes of, like a Maresca, of course, is structured. We've mentioned it already, structured. It's all about the structure. The chance creation is structured. It's about opening up that space, trying to get a third man to run and open up that gap, so it's structured. We see the chance creation, and of course we see players tucking up, pushing forward, and of course we see that being there. As I said, the transition, quick transition for it is immediate reaction, immediate regain. Maresca is very protective with the structure. It's a case where he allows you to feel like you have this time, the effort, the space, the opportunity to do things, and then you have a Manchester Caicedo who can, in a matter of seconds, press you to the point where you only have no choice but to give the ball away. So that is why it's going to be a tactical match, because it's a case of seeing Hansi Flick's quick transition sort of philosophy being targeted by a structured, preventative sort of structure in Maresca's system with Chelsea. So the match is going to be fantastic. It's going to be interesting. The match cannot be boring. The only thing is that we may not see a lot of goals, but I do think that that could also be the case. So we'll have to see what happens. I'm very interested in this match, very excited. But the tempo, I said it's a whole massive of sprints, massive amount of sprints from Flick. Maresca is all about the waves, all about trying to slowly make those shock waves through the defense of the opponent, and it requires you to understand the philosophy massively. So as I've said, it's two philosophies, one collision. Football will be breathtaking because at the end of the day, it's structure versus chaos. And when I say chaos for Hansi Flick, I don't mean it in a negative way, as if it cannot bring you rewards. It can. They won against Athletic 4-0. It can bring you rewards. And Chelsea's structured system requires the team to get the ball at times, but it's about what can you do with the ball. If we give you the ball, you have to pass the ball quickly, and that is what we saw with Burnley. They had to move the ball quickly. They had to try to find passes, and because they were rushing it, they weren't able to get beyond a certain point. And then you, with the likes of Andre Santos, who's pressing you, can drop deep, can clear the lines, can control the tempo as well as you can get with Enzo Fernandez at time, or be that ball with the midfield and make those key passes like a Caicedo. That is what makes this system. That is what makes that midfield for Chelsea so fascinating. As I've said, Barcelona will be missing the likes of Pedri, sadly for them. So in terms of what that double pivot or what that midfield could generally bring, it's going to be a whole different dynamic. And it really would have been nice to see a very good sort of double pivot with the likes of a Pedri and a Frankie de Jong, and if it ends up being Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez, which typically seems to going to be the case based on who was rested against Burnley and who came on and who played. So of course it's very important to take all those things into consideration. But I'm very interested in this match, very excited, and it's going to be two philosophies colliding, two tactical acumen managers who always try to get the best out of their teams. So can't wait to see what happens on Tuesday, November 25 at 8 p.m. UK time for the UEFA Champions League match, a match that both teams will also want to win, because at the end of the day, if they don't win, they have to find themselves, try to remove themselves from being in a playoff situation. They have matches to go, but a win here for either team pushes them or propels them higher to find a better way to get closer to the round of 16 and avoid the playoffs as well. So thank you guys so much for watching this more tactical analysis aspect of our preview for the match. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope I did speak a lot of sense for you guys. But thank you guys for watching. This is our 23-minute long video, and it's very detailed as I want it to be. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Stay safe, cheers, and up the shows for all my Chelsea fans.